Hello, welcome to some Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
And today we're going to talk a little bit more about Ultimate Intrigue. But before we do that, Buddy, why don't you tell the folks at home what we do on this podcast?
Well, it's pretty simple. We like to talk about games. Except on, I guess, if you tuned into our most recent bonus-ode, which is on the page. It's about Batman v Superman. But yeah, no, we're back. We're doing games this time, for real. But before we do that, I guess we played some games this week, right?
Yeah, just as a point of order, the bonus is probably going to go up after this episode goes up.
Oh, fair enough.
As part of our 6 months celebration.
Oh, damn.
Woo.
Do we have a... wow, geez, 6 months. Man, we're really good at this, though.
Yeah, just, we're persistent if nothing else.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. Anyway, things... happened. Last week we played both Rune Lords and Hell's Rebels, actually.
Yes, we did. I
don't really remember what happened in Rune Lords.
Rune Lords, we discovered the Wooden Wanderer's true past.
Oh, yeah, can you break that story down? The kid, it was oddly confusing at the time, and I wasn't quite sure I got it. A kid gets lost in a forest, comes out, gets adopted by a family, and then his family is murdered by the forest. Is that...
I don't know if he ever got lost in the forest in the first place, but the child came from the forest. He grew up, had a family, and then the forest exsanguinated his wife and children, and he went off into the forest, I guess, to get vengeance, and no one ever saw him again. Except he's the Wooden Wanderer. That person everybody recognizes the Wooden Wanderer as that person. They've been surprisingly coy about it for someone who walked off into the woods after their family was exsanguinated. So I
also don't quite understand why they were being coy about it. This is going to be not a real point, but a little bit of one. This is just like a storytelling pet peeve of mine. It's like characters treating something like a mystery because the plot demands that it be treated like a mystery, when in reality, what reason do these characters have for not telling you, right? That I don't know. I guess I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. Maybe they don't want to
I definitely feel that it's also kind of like hard to kind of like slot that type of thing into an existing storyline, so don't begrudge Mark too much for it. Also, the people in Turtleback Fury are supposed to be a little bit off. They were
I guess
kind
that's
of
true.
ostensibly
Well, the thing is,
God.
I think you could have replaced that trope with a trope that makes a different amount of sense, right? Where, like, Galadros is welcomed. You know what I mean? Like, the Wooden Wanderer is, like, welcomed home, and everybody's treating him like he was before he was an amnesiac, and you have to kind of, you know what I mean? Like, that would have made sense, and it's same tropey stuff, as the nobody, nobody wants to talk about it. But I just didn't think there was a compelling enough reason for nobody to want to talk about it.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. It did in some ways feel like kind of like the plot demanded it, but I'm okay with that.
Oh, also, by the way, I accept that is just nitpicky bullshit. But and then we figured out the black arrows, just kind of whatever.
Yeah. Is that's still a plot thread that needs to resolve itself, right?
Yeah, technically speaking, I think we've set up a plan, but we haven't quite executed it yet, and we'll see what happens. Yeah, the black arrows are actually kind of an interesting thing for me to be dealing with, because part of this game is about me breaking from my typical stereotype almost of characters, right? Like, the first game that I played with Mark in this world, I literally took over the Black Arrows, and I created this whole, like, system for how they were, like, organized, like, from a hierarchy perspective, and we led them as, like, an army and all this mass combat and everything. It was a lot of fun. I was a real big fan of all that kind of stuff, right? But even though this character, like Kenzo, has a connection to the Black Arrows, I've been really trying hard not to fall back into that same, like, groove of the plot, right? Like, and I don't know, to a certain extent, I think it's a little bit of like a catch-22, right? On one hand, I don't want Kenzo to follow the same path as Kanbei did, right? In taking over the Black Arrows and leading them, but on the other hand, I actually think it's kind of the more... First of all, I think it's the more... it's kind of a little bit more in character for Kenzo, and also it makes for a better story for Kenzo, since, like, basically his whole story is about, accepting, taking on and accepting these responsibilities that he otherwise shirked for his entire life. But maybe that's just me being too nitpicky about my own characters.
Yeah, maybe. But yeah, it's definitely neat stuff to be dealing with. I'm enjoying that game. Although it seems like we are, I don't know if in the home stretch is accurate, but we are nearing. We are definitely on the back half of that game.
Yeah, I think the honeymoon period is over to a certain extent, and so there's, I don't know. I like this stuff more than the tournament, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like the tournament was neat, but like between scheduling stuff causing it to drag on, and just like the sheer amount of content in it, the tournament kind of really dominated this campaign.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I also think that the conspiracy surrounding it was kind of too convoluted for its own good. I was actually thinking about this earlier, and I was like, I actually kind of almost like the idea as like the tournament as elongated kind of dungeon. But when you have this huge domineering, tournament thing going on, and then on top of it, this ridiculously complicated conspiracy plot, you kind of, one of those doesn't mesh. You're right. You either have to simplify the story half of it so that it can kind of survive not being dealt with like week to week to week to week, or you have to sacrifice, this hardcore dedication to the tournament from a fight perspective.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think I agree with you on that.
But I'm not going to get bent out of shape about it. I hear books 4 and 5 suck. Mark has said basically that he's removed them to a certain extent. So
yeah, I haven't gotten to them yet. My SF game, because that game rarely, if ever, meets.
Yeah, you guys are just doing Wrath of the Righteous like all the time now.
Yeah, it's fun. Well, part of it is that our fifth or sixth member who lives in the South Bay has been consistently available for the past 4 or 5 weeks. And so we've just been like, okay, we're freaking going for it. So we've pounded through some nice stuff. Like the last weekend, the RP was pretty great. They caught a spy in the ranks, and dealing with that was neat. Especially because I love this ability. So the Justiciar Prestige class has an ability that they know the letter of the law not instantaneously, but completely. And it updates itself instantaneously if new laws pass. Like, one of their powers is just, like, complete knowledge of the law. And the class itself is actually kind of underwhelming in terms of the type of power it gives a character. And it's a kind of, like, balls to the wall campaign. So I gave that power to one of my characters on essentially an item, a mythic item. It's part of the powers of the crossbow of the first Justiciar, and it's great to kind of deal with those kind of legal, like, things. Like, I love sitting down and like dealing with trying to figure out like the little things, like how like a legal code would deal with some of the kind of problems you that are a little bit different in a fantasy world, especially in one where like the law is being generated by what's essentially a monarch. Like, my personal favorite example of this is, like, they're fighting demons, and demons mind control shit. So, and so mind control would probably be illegal, right? Like, dominate person and compulsion effects. But it'd probably also be legal to use, like, truth-based compulsion effects, because that like, if you had, like, the way I styled it was, like, you need a permit to be able to use truth-based compulsion effects. Another thing I thought about, which I've just been like thinking about the details of this a little bit too much, is like, oh, well, would it then be illegal to prepare a mind control spell? It's like, Well, not necessarily, because you could use that to counterspell, so it wouldn't, well, that'd probably be a piece of case law. I don't know. I have a lot of fun with that kind of little world-building pieces. I think maybe I'm alone in that, but I think that's a lot of fun.
I don't want... I suppose... I get where you're coming from. See, I have a lot of fun from it from like an opposite perspective, right? I like solving plot holes to a certain extent, right? In games with stuff like this, and making things that's like, well, like how did this kind of thing work? I like that kind of minutia, but I wonder if this would fall in that category. See, I would probably end up making up all this shit up on the fly. I think there wouldn't be the kind of like forethought or like rhyme or reason to it.
It's part of it for me too. Is it's also I've got a paladin and a justiciar and a cleric of Abadar in the party, so it's also a tool in my toolbox to kind of steer the campaign a little bit, right? Like to essentially cut off some options that would otherwise be a little bit, essentially be like if I prohibit mind control, I can affect the way that the game plays out in certain ways. It causes some neat inter-party tension. Also, there's some little table issues that it helps kind of like, or is it like can I use dominate person on a party member? Well, you don't have to worry about that because it's illegal, and you will fall if you do that. So,
it's funny. Wow, that's hardcore.
Yeah, not that it's a problem yet, but I kind of foresee some of these things happening. Excuse me, like one of my players, they decided to execute the traitor, which is perfectly reasonable. And then one of the more goody two shoes paladins in the paladin army, just in the NPC, decided that they wanted to do burial rites or whatever. And one of the player characters was like, "I want the head so I can make a sentry skull." I'm like, What is a sentry skull?" And I look up the spell. It's like necromancy evil. Like, no, not only
Jeez.
The paladin, one, wants to give proper burial rites, and two, you can't cast that spell legally. So it helps with like stuff like that. I don't know. I think it's neat, but
yeah, I feel that. I think that is that is neat. I could see myself getting like into it. I didn't actually realize there was that much kind of oversight when it comes to the world wound. Like this is, I guess, Pathfinder lore stuff, but I don't know. Like the idea of there being legal stuff happening up there is interesting.
This kind of came into play because the character that is a cavalier of the Order of the Scales and a follower of Abadar, and kind of was interested in the Justiciar class. And so it kind of became part of that. And so part of it too is that there's mass combat, that happens. And so there's like these events that happen with the army and like kind of dissension in the ranks type of stuff. And so I saw an opportunity to kind of pull it in. And it probably wouldn't have been there at all if it hadn't been for this, what's supposed to, he's before the main event of Wrath of the Righteous, which is a big ol' like a demon attacks a city and it sunders the city in twain, essentially. This happens in like moment 3 of the opening book. Before that, this character is like essentially a police officer.
Gotcha.
Right?
Okay.
And if he hadn't been there, it wouldn't have this bent to it. But I think it's kind of nice to kind of try and play into those kind of unique character things. And maybe I'm doing a little bit too much with this particular character, but it's just kind of easy to do it with that.
Yeah, I mean, I
feel
the army. I feel the exact same way about Hell's Rebels stuff, right? Like, it's easy for me to generate content for, I was actually talking to Warren about this today, of all things. I picked him up from the airport this morning. It's easy for me to kind of like tie in Rakax and you to the plot because you're very rooted in Kintargo and in these two big establishment families that it's really easy for me to kind of like inject stuff for like them to deal with, right? Like Rakax's love interest is engaged to, the leader of one of these bad organizations, right? That's not something I could do with Marigrug in the same way, or it's not something I could do with, Alaric, right? And I actually had a hard time with Alaric. Alaric was the last one that I figured out, like what kind of where I wanted to go with him, and I kind of ended up on this, Elector Fortinax, his mentor, comes to the university and he's expelled from his faraway place where he, you know what I mean? That only came to me like 2 weeks before I actually ran it in the game. And so, it's just kind of natural. It's also stuff like Jimmy's stuff won't hit until book 3 because his stuff is explicitly Ravenel, right? The whole province, the countryside, right?
Right.
He's very rooted in that stuff and that culture. And as soon as you guys break out of the city, because obviously book 1 is in the city, book 2 is in the city for the most part, and then in book 3 it becomes about gaining the support of the entire countryside on your side. All of a sudden, he's going to have a whole bunch of stuff to deal with. In a bigger way, though obviously this whole subplot with the Coven of Lilith and these beastmen in Kintargo is a little bit in there.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely enjoying. Thank you for all the work you've put in. It's been a neat ride so far with Hell's Rebels, which is a good way to segue into Hell's Rebels because we also played that game this week. And what did we do this week? We rescued some. What were they, like?
Tiefling. Yeah, the Tiefling prisoners.
Right.
Yeah, honestly, that map is supposed to be the opening. You guys aren't even supposed to, like, form the Silver Ravens until you all collectively agree to go to that place, that livery. And in there you find out about the Ravens because of like some stash or whatever, and and that's when you get the idea. And so the idea is you don't actually even found the Ravens until you're like at the end of level 2 almost, and get into this other stuff. So this is a bit of the restructuring that I was talking about before. Okay. Well, because, Gondor, Gondor obviously isn't in the game as Gondor. He's in the game as a different character with a different agenda and motive. And it's kind of the idea to start the rebel organization happens, like, kind of way later. Which I obviously wasn't super keen on, so I changed around that beginning, and then I used this map for the Coven of Lilith, because one of the things that bothered me about the original version of Hell's Rebels is that because it's written by 6 different people, there's a lot of different miniature things that happen that are all really unconnected and just random. It's like filler episodes in an anime or something like that. And so what I decided to do was instead I would have, we would have this main plot going along, and then kind of the subplots that are linked together so that it all holds together in kind of a more cohesive way. But yeah. And so what were the other things that happened? We argued about what to do for a little while. There is some tension growing between what appears to be the nobles, Beauregard and Alaric and Rakax, kind of over the priorities of the rebellion. And so we'll see how that plays out. That's going to happen not tomorrow. The next day.
Yeah. It will happen tomorrow from the perspective of the listeners.
That's true. You're right.
Not that the listeners need to know that we're behind on a recording again.
Well, we're not technically behind. This is the second episode. We just
that is
recorded
true.
Batman
That is true.
Superman on Tuesday.
Yeah, bonus episodes. That was
Yeah, exactly.
That was
We're
a
going
smart
above and beyond
idea.
for our listeners.
Oh,
right?
of course, all the time. But
yeah, I'm a little bit interested. To see how that plays out.
yeah, I am too. But we also hit level 3, which is also kind of a fun point for players. I feel because I feel like level 3 is right around when you really start to feel your character, like the power of your character starts to fill in.
Yeah, I feel that.
And so I'm excited to kind of play around with level 3 stuff. Although for me, a lot of the cooler things for me happened at level 2. So I'm happy, and then the cooler stuff again happens at level 5. But it's all gravy, as they say.
Yeah, it'll get neat for Enoch unlocks his the critical thing from the what did I call that class? The Dreadnought, the critical strike on the challenge. Enoch unlocks that this level, so we'll I guess we'll see a little bit more. I don't know. I'm excited to see that class take off a bit, just because it is my class, obviously, and I'm excited to see where you guys where you guys go. I really like this clenched jaws thing. This clenched jaws one is something that I've been looking forward to for a bit.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll see how that plays out. I'm excited too. But
yeah.
You been doing anything with video games this week, buddy?
Oof. I have. One that I actually want to talk a bit about. The Banner Saga. I played the Banner Saga again because the Banner Saga 2 comes out in a week, and I had no idea.
Oh, really?
A week from tomorrow, I think. Yeah, and I fucking love the Banner Saga, and it's crazy because I love this game, and I feel like nobody talks about it. Like, there are certain of these games that people come back to all the time. People always reference The Walking Dead, or people always reference Gone Home or whatever when it comes to kind of these indie games, and I'm surprised that the Banner Saga floats under everyone's radar because it's so good. It's so great.
I've always remembered Banner Saga as being one of the early big Kickstarter successes, which it was, and it was excellent for that.
Yeah,
but was Walking Dead's not really an indie game. That's made by Telltale, which is an ancient adventure game studio.
I mean, just in the sense of, yeah, sure, fair enough. But it has indie game aesthetics more. It has more in common with the indie games than it does with AAA. I don't really know that I would call it one way or the other.
I don't know if I agree with you, but I think it kind of defines. Yeah.
No, but my point is, I think it kind of defies that classification of either your AAA or your, the Square Enix put out Life is Strange, which is basically the exact same version of game like The Walking Dead, and that's a AAA company putting out an indie aesthetic game. I would say.
I don't know if I agree that adventure games are automatically indie aesthetic, which is what seems.
It's not that they're automatically. It's just that if we're going to talk about it in one context or another, kind of thing. I don't know. I definitely think that it's. I don't know. I think that that kind of diaspora is something that gets talked about in the scene. It's kind of like how you have blockbuster films and you have Oscar bait, right? Oscar bait is meant to look like indie art house stuff, right? But it's still being made by Warner Brothers and Walt Disney. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't. Okay, I think this might be we're not talking about this now, but I think we might have to agree to disagree on this one for now because I don't really have deep arguments for that. That just feels wrong to me.
Okay, well, the other half of this, the other reason I'm kind of clumping these together in my mind is because the Banner Saga is a really great example of an ideal that exists in my brain. Because we talk about it all the time in the cast, right? Like we talk about this divide between games as art, quote unquote, and games as skill. And even in our discussions, we tend to favor it in almost this context of games as skill are about mechanics, right, and very little story, narrative, any of that kind of stuff, or games as sport rather, and games as art are all about story, you know what I mean, and character, and all of the, and like mechanics and stuff just contributes to shitty things like ludonarrative dissonance or whatever. And I think that the perfect version of a game isn't made that way, like I think that there's a version of a game like like a Mass Effect 2, like a Banner Saga, that has a whole bunch of mechanics but also tells a compelling story with interesting three-dimensional dynamic characters, right? And that kind of gets lost in the conversation about this stuff a lot, right? Like I feel like people this is part of my problem with indie games, I guess, is what I'm getting at. I feel like people let these games off the hook a little bit. Your Gone Homes and your Dear Esther's, for their lack of mechanics, when to me it's kind of like, and I know you're going to hate this comparison because we've talked about this before, but to me it's kind of like a film willfully having no, like, completely bland cinematography. It's just like it's a very potent tool that is available to developers, and they're intentionally avoiding it for whatever reason. And the answer isn't to avoid these, right? The answer isn't to avoid mechanics and to pretend that mechanics aren't important to your game and don't foster engagement and don't reinforce kind of the point of whatever the story is coming across. The point is that these two things synthesize into a better version, and I think the Banner Saga is like the best. Man, I think it's so good. It's probably my game from that year, like my game of the year from that year.
No, I definitely feel it. I think part of that synthesis is why I like Bastion so much, because I feel like it accomplishes that well as well. That kind of like be like the kind of immersion into the character. I definitely feel you there. But yeah, Banner Saga 2 probably will be interesting. I had no idea it was coming out until you told me about it. Right,
I had no idea about it until like 2 or 3 weeks ago, when something I must have just seen like an off reference on like Twitter or something, or like maybe on Reddit, just like one of these places where I train myself to intake vast quantities of information and filter it for stuff that's useful. And hey, having the Banner Saga 2 come out, that's useful information. It's nice replaying the Banner Saga because I didn't quite realize how bad I was at the game the first time. To a certain extent, the combat is a lot easier once you like get it, and I've min-maxed it a lot to situations where my characters aren't dying or getting injured in these fights, because I know the most, picking off those two-handed dredge that are carrying those massive weapons is like by far the most important thing to do. And once you get them down, it's pretty easy to kind of clean up everyone else without too much trouble.
Yeah, I never finished the game. I played it for a little while, and I thought it was a good game. I just never got around to finishing it out.
That happened to me when I first got it. I played it for, like a day or two, but then I just kind of dropped it for something else. Probably League, because I'm terrible about combining games with League. And but then I just kind of came back to it one day. It also helped, by the way, that I took 2 days off from work because I had maxed out on my time off, and I just needed to burn it a little bit. And so I didn't really have any, I didn't really have anything to do, so I played through the Banner Saga again.
Yeah, it's always a good way to spend your time off, is burning through neat games. This week I also played an indie game, very different indie game. Have you heard of Enter the Gungeon?
Yes. Oh man, everybody's talking about it.
Yeah, no, it's by Dodge Roll Studios, I believe, and it's published by Devolver Digital. Love Devolver Digital. They publish all these great weird games that I love to play around with. I think they published Hotline Miami. They
oh wow.
They published The Hatoful Boyfriend. and just a ton of really cool games. I really adore them as a publisher. Um, but this game is great because I love roguelikes. I have never played the original Rogue, but I've spent a lot of hours playing NetHack, which is kind of like the spiritual successor to Rogue. It's like an open source a text based game that you can use with tile sets. I use with tile sets because I'm not hardcore enough to play with ASCII characters.
Okay.
And it's just this brutal, like, are you familiar with roguelikes, buddy?
Yeah, definitely. I am less familiar compared to you or a lot of the internet. I like stuff, I like stuff that is roguelike, like procedurally generated permadeath games like FTL, but
yeah. And so Under the Gungeon kind of, instead of having like a pure roguelike is kind of turn based. When everybody is frozen on the screen, and when you move, all the monsters get a turn, and everything kind of resolves that way. Well, this is kind of like more in the vein of pretty close, like Binding of Isaac or Rogue Legacy, even though it's a different perspective than Rogue Legacy. But like it's kind of free action combat, and you're firing your gun and you're shooting and you're dodging around. You're trying to. It's like a bullet hell meets a roguelike, and it's so neat to me. I just love it. It feels good. The mechanics are all very solid. There's like a gazillion different funny little guns. Like there's a t-shirt cannon that fires t-shirts at your enemies and knocks them back super hard. There's like a water pistol that mostly just like makes people wet and doesn't do much. There's your basic weapon that kind of it doesn't work great, but like it'll get the job done. And it just kind of has that great like meaty procedurally generated exploration bits that I really love about roguelikes, and the bosses are well designed. And the animation's really good too, so that always helps. There's these, and I think my favorite part is just how tongue-in-cheek the whole game is about itself.
Oh boy, if there's anything that's gonna make Mango happy, tongue-in-cheek.
So the Gungeon is a dungeon of guns, and like everything's a gun. The enemies are all bullets. The elevator that you ride down in is like a shell that opens up for like a giant like gun shaped or like shell shaped meteor crashed into the earth. The site that's like the story, and everything's been like mutated into guns. It's just so silly and up its own ass about it. It's great. Like, it's like one of the first bosses is like a raven wielding a machine gun, which I think is supposed to be a reference to Metal Gear Solid. But it's just so it doesn't take itself super seriously in that way, but there's supposed to, like the plot is that you're trying to like shoot your past or something, and I think there's a deeper story there, but I haven't quite gotten it. But every time you die, a crosshair made of bullets appears, and it like spins like a clock, and then it like aligns to a time and then shoots you. So I think that's going to be a bigger part of it, but I'm excited to play more of it.
Wow, jeez, okay.
The other thing I've been doing is I've been boning up on my Dark Souls lore, because Dark Souls 3 comes out when the cast goes up today, and so I need to be ready. I need to know how to praise the sun properly for Dark Souls 3, because I something I appreciate about this game is that the lore is all told in items, and so it lets people, when the lore is told like sideways and not directly, it lets people theorize and there's a lot of gaps that the players kind of have to theorize about and fill in. I appreciate that aspect of it, that not everything is known about the universe, because a lot of it's intentionally vague, right? Like a lot of the Mass Effect universe is very well fleshed out and kind of set in stone, and that's great. Like that's good for a complete story in that way. But what it doesn't do is have people years later theorizing about, who's Gwen's first son, stuff like that, and trading theories back and forth and arguing about that kind of thing, which is something I appreciate about the Dark Souls series.
I don't know, actually, because to a certain extent I appreciate that. I like it a lot when it comes to Five Nights at Freddy's. I'm really into the Five Nights at Freddy's lore and the theories behind kind of everything and how these games fit together and how they work. I don't know that I like the idea of just like a story told through items when it comes to a Western RPG like Dark Souls.
Dark Souls isn't Western.
Well, no, okay, so I understand that it's made by a Japanese developer. I just it is like it behaves like a Western RPG rather than a JRPG.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
I don't know how I feel about that. Also, my understanding is that the Dark Souls itself doesn't have much of a... See, because the weird part about it to me is like, things happening in Five Nights at Freddy's are stilted and weird because that game is all about these jump scares and anticipation, right, and all of that kind of stuff. But a game like Dark Souls is inherently... And this is why, this is just kind of why Western RPGs are so often keyed, I guess, to these narratives, right? Because you have your hero, and he levels up, and he gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and then he beats the final boss. That's a very classic hero story, right? But it's mirrored directly in the level up, getting better, more items, more skills, gameplay of a Western RPG. So the idea of decoupling those two things is it's like simultaneously like interesting and geez, yeah. I don't know that you know what I mean. Like it's one of those like weird things that might not work out if I saw it happen on paper. This is also fueled by what we talked about last week, where I never see anybody talk about this stuff. Right? Anytime anybody's mentioning Dark Souls, they're talking about it because the gameplay is super hard and the boss fights are like unforgiving. But if you stick with it, right, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. The reason that I started getting into the lore is because the type of people that play Dark Souls will like be like, yeah, and that lore though, and be like, what about that lore? It's like, oh man, you don't know about like the craziness here. And I think part of it is that like the surface story, like the story that is directly told to you, is kind of simple, but it's also like it doesn't like explain to you the motivations behind a lot of what's happening, and you kind of have to piece that together yourself. But that's actually why I'm excited to play Dark Souls 3, because it's got some of the same locations as the first one, and that implies a lot of weird stuff about about how the world works and like what's been theorized about how the second game slots into it. So I'm kind of curious as to what's going to come out of this game. I'm just super excited to see it all. Even though I haven't experienced most of it firsthand, most of it's been like these YouTube videos of crazy people ranting about like what is King Seeker Frampt really up to, and that kind of jazz.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, now that we've burned 40 minutes on on that stuff, Ultimate Intrigue game.
So
exists.
This week we're going to go over the non-vigilante archetypes and the feats section, because that's the next thing to do, and it's very crunchy and it's very neat.
There's a lot of crunch. So there's a whole bunch of these. We're obviously not going to get to all of them, but I guess I'm down to do the almost some of the stuff that we did a little bit last time. One of them, which happens to be the very first one, which is why I'm talking about it first, is the Alchemical Sapper, which is awesome. I actually really like this class. It is an alchemist class where you can use your bombs, which you typically like create and then lob and then throw. You can create kind of trip mines with them, or like not even trip mines, just actual things that you demolish when you want to. And I just think it's such a cool class, and it's totally a class that I could see myself play, because first of all, I really like the Alchemist. I've always wanted to play. I've always wanted to play an Alchemist, and it just looks so fun from kind of like a micromanaging like spaces and trying to trick people into triggering trip mines and stuff like that. I don't know. I like it a lot. I think it's. I definitely think it's a super neat class.
Oh yeah, I personally really like kind of classes designed around, not just doing whatever they do, but also kind of like fucking with the environment, right? Like this is the kind of class that you like. Well, we need to get into this fort, but the front door is really guarded. Well, why don't we blow a hole in the wall? And like that's what this class is kind of designed to do. Yeah. Right? Like is kind of explore those kind of weird those non-standard options that you don't, like that kind of, I think in my mind, make D&D kind of shine as compared to say their video game comparators, right? Like, well, why don't we do this thing that, is kind of off the rails? It's like, well, I've got a thing that's capable of blasting through walls, so why not? Let's go for it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think to a certain extent, some of these are cool in like, he gets that thing that people get where you get half your level to skills, right? But his are knowledge engineering, craft stonemasonry, and craft traps. It's just like, I could really see myself get down and dirty with a class like this, and just finding camouflage bomb, and selective detonation. Like,
I'm just imagining this being one of your cigar chopping characters. It's like, yeah, we're gonna need a detonation charge up in here, just kind of like rough.
Oh man, now that you said that, I would just play him exactly like the. Is he French? I don't think he's French. I think he's like Australian or something.
Oh, from
Atlantis, the Lost Empire. 100%. He's like, oh, bridge, like.
Hey, I made a bridge.
Hey, I made a bridge. I love that guy. First of all, I think that movie's underrated and awesome. Second of all, I think that guy is hilarious.
Yeah, that guy's my favorite character from that movie.
Wow, look at that. You and I agreeing on stuff like that.
The apocalypse is upon us.
Oh, Jesus. A singularity just opened halfway between LA and San Francisco.
Oh, man.
The next archetype is Interrogator, which does something that is simultaneously interesting, but I'd never want to do it. These injections, do you dislike the injections?
Yeah, I think it, I like the idea, but I'm not convinced on the execution. Essentially, I think it's a cool idea that you this kind of screamed, NPC archetype to me.
Oof, 100% agree.
I just don't see a player being able to kind of, use this effectively, in a normal game.
That is totally how I cannot believe that it actually replaces that these injections replace bombs. That seems nuts to me, because they're so weak. The bomb is a huge. It's what I guess if I was playing a kind of like. A Hulk version of the Alchemist where I'm focusing on my mutagens and stuff like this, I wouldn't necessarily mind, but it seems incredible to me that they lose their bomb.
Oh, they lose their mutagen too. That the serums replace the mutagen.
Oh yeah, I guess you're right. I didn't even. What? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know who would ever play this class. It's really interesting. It's really neat. I think it's a cool idea, but geez.
Yeah,
you'd have to be a brave man to play this.
Yeah, I mean, excuse me. I think the I think the fantasy is definitely there, right? Like the kind of mad scientist that compels things to do his bidding with these kind of alchemical concoctions. But like I said, I just don't see. I don't see it. I can see it working, I guess, in a particular campaign, designed to take a heavily intrigue based campaign rather than your typical dungeon delve style campaign. I think it could work, But I think it's a very niche archetype, more niche than most archetypes typically are.
Yeah, yeah. That I'm definitely with you there. I don't have any particular thoughts on the metamorph.
I thought it was really neat.
Okay.
I actually really liked it.
Can you sell me on the metamorph? This by the way, is kind of another one of those classes where I kind of felt like it gave up too much for too little.
So I kind of liked it as kind of like this kind of like again for the fantasy that is like the kind of like self-tinkerer, the person that like tries to become like more beast than man type of deal. And I think that you like the idea of that, like you jump into combat is kind of like this, like when combat arises, you kind of change into something else, and like that's how you fight it out. I thought that was super neat to me.
Okay.
I don't know if I can give you anything beyond that, right? Like the picture in the book is definitely of that metamorph archetype, and that just like idea is so cool to me.
I guess that's fair. I see where you're getting at when it comes to this. I guess I haven't actually read. I'll look at. I've never seen the monstrous physique spells. Maybe the monstrous physique spells will sell this on me. Now that I'm looking at the details. Yeah.
And now that I'm rereading it again, maybe there's just not enough uses of this thing to be. Maybe that might be a flaw, that like you only get one use until level 4, and you give up all of bombs, extracts, and mutagens for that. I actually gonna admit that I did not realize that. Like, what do you get besides that?
Well, you still get so you still get mutagen, I think.
Right. You get
mutagen anyway, but you lose bombs and extracts, which I think is rough. That's rough.
Yeah.
But I guess this monstrous physique thing is pretty okay-ish. It makes you tougher, makes you more powerful. You get a size bonus on your strength and +2 to natural armor as a medium monstrous humanoids, and you can do things like fly speed or climb speed or swim speed. So, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
And then, well, actually, now that I see, this is actually kind of secretly sweet. Because, so at 9th level, you can start doing some cool stuff where you take on large monstrous humanoids. You get to, and do you get all the way up to, you get all the way up to Monstrous Physique 4, which is a 6th level spell, obviously. You get all the way up to Monstrous Physique 4, which allows you to be a huge monstrous humanoid. That's crazy. You can be huge. It's wow.
Wait, when do you get huge?
You get huge at 13th level.
Yeah,
you get huge at 11th level. Holy shit.
I think that's pretty cool.
That is actually super neat. I am for this. I admit I just didn't even read that part at this time. At the start of this, I also don't know what giant form does, but I suppose giant form it turns you into a giant.
Probably.
Which is kind of awesome. Wow, that's actually okay. I take it all back. That's a super neat class. It's like Wild Shape, but for monstrous humanoids. Wow, that's neat. It wouldn't be a class I would play because I wouldn't like burn my. I really want to play like a bomby alchemist.
Yeah.
Oh man, I could actually totally see myself play a class like that though. That is so cool. Anyway, bard stuff. None of this bard stuff interests me.
Oh,
because bards fucking suck.
So, like looking at it, like there's a couple classes like this which are like messengers. Like there's one for the ranger, I think too. It's like that. That's really like a thing. Like
yeah.
I guess they have to be very NPC. Like they're probably NPC-ish, I guess. But it's like they got bonuses when they're delivering them. Like what is?
Well, so to a certain extent, I actually think that stuff is interesting. A campaign that I've always kind of wanted to run and I'm not saying this just because I played the Banner Saga, but it's definitely on my mind, is like a very caravan-y kind of campaign, where, you know, it is a lot about it's a lot about traveling from day to day and from place to place and moving across a landscape and tracking across a map, right? It's one of, you know, like one of those campaigns where, like, you know, like every day there's a chance for a random encounter kind of things and people you're meeting on the road. And I think that stuff is super cool. And I would love to do a hardcore campaign along those lines. And I think you could maybe sell me on an Impervious Messenger in that sense.
Yeah.
Like the lore of that would fit so well, like on a, oh, is he going to spill what is the message kind of thing, right? Like we need to move quick, cool, wonderful. At 8th level we get Unbroken Stride, which allows us to use bardic performances to make us, move fast kind of stuff.
Yeah, the one thing I don't like about some, like, these particular classes is kind of what it implies by the memory mechanics. Like they're like these type of archetypes all have these kind of mechanics to memorize something, which makes sense in kind of in its own sense, but it also, like, it's also a weird kind of thing from a gameplay perspective, because that's something that's inherently also going to be tied to the player's ability to remember something. Like, I don't think I've ever denied a player, like, if a player was like, I don't remember what that was, can you tell me? I've never been like, well, I guess your character doesn't remember then. Like,
yeah, that's a little sticklery.
And on the flip side of that, I would never be like, if the player's like, well, I remember he said that this, and I'm never going to be like, well, your character doesn't remember that because he's not smart. Like who does that, right? And this kind of mechanic kind of implies that has to happen at some level, I guess, and that's not something I'm a huge fan of.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you there.
And I guess it's not so powerful that you're, like, really cutting, like, it's not so much of this class's power budget that you're really cutting down their power by not making that a mechanic, but I don't know.
Yeah, I actually think that this one is more balanced, kind of in, like, I think the Sapper is also very balanced in, like, the power budget reads to me as basically the exact same. I don't really think you still have the big ones, Inspire Courage and Inspire Heroism, right? You lose the ones that people don't really use as often. Fascinate, Suggestion, Dirge of Doom, which seems fine to me, right? Like, to replace out kind of the B and C list options for you, to gain different B or C list options, that's kind of like no problem to me at all.
Yeah. The Mass Performer's neat, I think, because it's kind of got, like, that, it's kind of got, like, it uses the vigilante rules for the multiple personalities. I'm sorry, did you want to say anything else about the Impervious Messenger?
Nope, the Impervious, yeah, I'm fine with that.
I think it's neat to kind of, like, bring it in like that, to bring in some of those, vigilante mechanics into some of the other classes with, like, the dual identity, but I think that's mostly what this class is. It's like...
and the thing is, the two identities aren't actually separate, you know what I mean? It's just, one of them is... I can't think of a good example. One of them is Boogie 2988, and the other one is Francis.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody knows they're the same person, which I kind of feel like, to me, it's a little bit like, what's the point? But, hey, if you want to play a fusion...
If you want to play,
go for it.
If you want to play Stephen Colbert,
yeah, that's a great example.
I think it's a neat fantasy. Don't know how it would play out and kind of like play. Did you have anything to say about Ringleader?
I like the Ringleader a bit, but honestly, it kind of uses mechanics that are covered in the feats, I guess. So I don't necessarily, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to go nuts on the ringleader. I like the ringleader, but you can play the ringleader just by taking the right feats. Is my thing with it. So.
Yeah.
I actually do I like the fantasy of the Sorrow Soul a little bit more than the actual mechanics of it. But, the idea of a bard who's kind of empowered by grief, rage, and tragedy is something I can kind of get behind.
The
mechanics are basically uninteresting to me, though.
I thought the mechanics are kind of interesting because it's like you've kind of given up the teamwork aspect to be kind of like this very this kind of very emo kind of like, no one understands me, not even my party.
This is the dashboard confessional of classes. Yeah, I definitely like. I guess I like that to a certain extent, giving up my teamwork focus so that I can be the better performer. That's kind of cool, I guess.
Yeah, but I think it's I think it's neat in that way that you've kind of got this that you've got the emo bard. That's what Pathfinder was really missing, a way for angsty teens to express themselves.
Yeah, for real.
And I think wit is neat, but it relies a lot on these later kind of like verbal
duel rules. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've looked a bit at these rules. Hint, hint. I don't like them all that much, but that we'll get into that stuff later.
Yeah,
I suppose.
I've got issues with kind of all of these archetypes that appear in these books that kind of are like is really good at the optional systems presented at the back of the book. Because they're optional systems, they're not written into most of the content, and like they don't get used a lot, and so I don't know. I feel like they. Well, I guess like the intention makes sense. I just don't think that. I just never feel them to be particularly compelling. So it's like good at the thing that may or may not ever happen.
Yeah.
Right.
When it comes I actually like a lot of these Cavalier archetypes.
I do too.
My favorite one actually is in here, but the Courtly Knight, this is one to me where I actually think these vigilante mechanics make a lot of sense and are pretty cool. When it comes to this social presence idea, I actually kind of like the idea of someone, who's a a courtly, chivalrous, bluffy diplomacy knight, on one hand, but also like a fighter and like a warrior on the other hand, right? I think that kind of is neat.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like the kind of like like the puffy court noble with the martial skill to back it up.
Yeah, and I definitely think that it's very power neutral because it just replaces the tactician tree basically, which I think tactician is powerful definitely, and you're definitely giving something up, but you're getting real bonuses, right? These kinds of stuff just turn you into a face. So
yeah,
there's that.
Daring General. I love this archetype.
This is legit my favorite archetype. Okay, cool. Can we just this is my favorite. I read this archetype and I was like, holy Christ. What an awesome fucking archetype. I would love to play this. Like,
yeah, the general lawman that I was talking about, he's going to take this archetype because he's like right at the level where it would start kicking in.
Oh, no way. Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, see that. Oh, it's so cool.
And if your campaign has mass combat in it, you get like to use your army as a mass. You get to use your like your literal army as an army in the game. It's so cool to me. It's so, oh man.
I think the thing that I like a lot about it is it makes for using your followers from like the leadership feat, right? Like a lot of times people play with leadership disabled, right? Because it's got a lot of weird connotations on stuff. But I actually like the idea of like a mastermind character who is built to fight with his cohorts and with his followers in a battle. I actually think that's awesome. I don't know. I think I love this. I love this archetype so much. I want to play this so bad.
No, it's definitely up there. I can see it becoming a little bit odious, because this class gets 3 cohorts, and so that means like when it comes time for battle, one of your players gets 4 turns to everybody else's 1. That might be a little bit.
That's kind of fair to a certain extent. I think that, I mean, if it was me, I would have everybody just act on the same initiative in that kind of animal companion sense. Like, I understand that obviously, that's not how it should work in kind of an ideal systemic way, but I just don't. I just can't care enough because it's so cool. I like that you can assign them like little classes like footman and honor guard. I think that's so neat. I would actually love almost an expansion of that kind of stuff. I like the idea of like, if I have if my followers are swordsmen, they're one kind of thing. If they carry great axes, they're another. If they like that kind of stuff, I think is really neat and interesting. I don't know. There's a lot to this class that I just really really like.
Yeah, I feel like the non-cohort followers, I think I would are probably not going to make an appearance in most combats. Just kind of like, because they're going to be like super far underleveled, and that's just like a whole nother level of like mooks. I don't know.
That's fair, I suppose. I also think that you get a ton of followers from the leadership feed.
Yes, you do.
If you kind of build it right. Though I've never really seen anybody attempt to build it right, I suppose. Then I don't really have anything to say all that much about the Hussar. Their mount is faster and more maneuverable, which is exactly agile and maneuverable cavalry.
Yeah. it's like exactly what it wants to be. It's fine for what it is, but it's not really special. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Same thing with these druid. Actually, there's one of these druid archetypes that I like a whole bunch, but the first two, the face speaker and the skin shaper, I kind of didn't realize that face speaker wasn't kind of an archetype. I always think of druids as being very connected to face stuff, and I didn't really realize how unconnected they were until I read through this archetype.
Yeah, and I think it's totally good at what it wants to be, which is, it's Fae stuff. There's a couple feats that support it too. And Skin Shaper is like just the freaking description. Using the same primal energy which other druids assume animal forms, Skin Shapers can imitate some of the most dangerous beasts of all. Humans and other humanoids. The most dangerous game.
I like this class actually. In fact, I actually think that this class is kind of like a more perfect version of Wild Shape almost. I actually don't like Wild Shape where you just become the thing. I actually like a version of Wild Shape where it's something like, okay, at 8th level, if you Wild Shape, you can gain, dark vision, low light vision, scent, climb and fly and all this kind of stuff. By assuming, if they take the fly speed, oh great, they're they're a falcon kind, you know what I mean, like that kind of stuff.
Okay,
I think that the actually adopting of like monsters is not great game design.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of like for the actual adopting the monster, I think it's like kind of like two-sided for me. I think they tried to split the difference too much. There's a lot of powerful animal abilities out, or like monster abilities out there, that I think would be cool to be able to temporarily have access to. But the nature of Wild Shape locks most of those away from you. Right? The coolest abilities are never on the list of things you get to do if you are like in that form. and so it's kind of saddening, right? Like you don't get to like use the more like what's the like the screeching plant. I can't freaking remember the name of it. The Mandragora, maybe. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, like
I think isn't it like a weird Hydra thing?
it's not like this applies to any number of things. You don't get the coolest abilities from the monster because those are all like very specific abilities that aren't included in the abilities you get off of the spell shape, or off of the polymorph spell, and so it kind of makes them less. It makes those spells less fun. I think it makes sense because you have to kind of for power budget reasons limit it. But I think a version that lets you get all of those powers for a much shorter period of time would be neat. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that is. I guess that is pretty sweet.
And I think I agree with you that like this kind of like pushes it more in the other direction, which is more generalized kind of benefits, which is also a good way to do it. Like I said, I think the way that the base druid does it kind of splits the difference a little too much. Because I do think that there's some value to the fantasy of like turning into a bear and like bearing shit up. But
yeah, no, I definitely So I definitely agree that there's value to that fantasy. I just think it's kind of like imperfectly represented when it comes to the actual sentences and words of the ability. But then this one I like a lot. The next one, the Urushiol, I guess.
No, really, I just kind of looked at it. It's like, oh, that's the poison version. But yeah, go convince me.
So I don't necessarily know that I want to try and like hardcore convince you. I just think that it's like neat. This is a version of a druid that you would kind of think of, but nobody like thought of, right? Like, what happens if I'm a druid that specifically focuses on the poisons in nature, right? Like, I just wanted to become a lot like like those tropical frogs or whatever in the Amazon rainforest. And I actually think that they do poisons a good amount of justice, because the poisons do, it's a very straightforward poison. It just does a little bit of strength damage with a DC keyed to your level and your wisdom modifier. You have a couple of doses per day that you can use in a variety of ways, and later on you can spend 2 doses to secrete a contact poison. Or you can use one to create a cloud of poison and stuff like that. I think that's pretty cool. And I think if anybody is looking for like that poisoner archetype, right, stuff like the dagger mark poisoner doesn't hit the mark for me, but something like the Urushiol does.
Yeah, you know what? I think you're right. Right, like this is a very good version of a lot of like the poisoning stuff. I didn't realize it until you pointed it out, but like having the DC scale with level as opposed to scale with like nothing, where for like the older style poisons.
Yeah.
Like that's always the biggest complaint is like because they are resources purchased with gold, the DCs can't really scale, and so they're not great.
Yeah. Yep.
And having it kind of tied to like your poison frog totems or whatever, I think that's cool. I'd like to see a system kind of like the way that I guess Mark handled like kind of modifications to Dagger Mark Poisoner, which is like you take it out of the gold pool by essentially the Dagger Mark Poisoner gets like a box worth of poisons from the guild as a class feature, and then you can have those scale because it's not tied to gold anymore. I'd like to see something like that for rogues, or even like a weird poison touched version of a rogue, which is like was affected by poison or something and now secretes poison from their skin. Like this I think this skill set on a rogue would be neat. Like these specific mechanics, these toxic secretion mechanics.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think. Yeah, I definitely agree with you.
I also like
because this was I agree with my own point, I guess.
Yeah. I also like that it replaces Nature Bond, because then you don't have to worry about animal companions. I mostly like being, like, kind of, like, having archetypes that kind of, like, force you to not deal with, like, some of what can be the more odious mechanics.
Yeah, I definitely feel you there. Like, I mean, obviously, the Dreadnought is entirely a class built on this, or an archetype built on this, and removing that mount from the class.
All right, Inquisitor stuff. I think the Inquisitions are whatever. Like, the Inquisitions are fine. Nothing, I think, worth really.
See, I don't really know enough about the Inquisitor. It's just like it's not a class that has really stuck out in my mind to make a lot of value judgments when it comes to this.
Oh, but don't you know you could replace all the divine classes in the game with Inquisitor and be great.
Yeah, this, by the way, is referring to a meme of ours where Mark wanted to, we were talking about creating our own campaign setting and limiting what classes are available from, like, a world perspective, right? Like, if the gods are silent, how can you be a cleric, right? And so when we were in that conversation, Mark basically said that cleric, oracle, paladin, war priest, all of these classes are redundant, and that it should all be the only class that should be available for divine players is the Inquisitor. So that's one perspective on things. I like the Cloaked Wolf archetype to a certain extent. I think it's cool, and I think it's straightforward. I see, in my mind, I think it's weak mechanically, but I don't really know. I think of solo tactics and teamwork feats as being pretty strong for the Inquisitor, so losing that for Unleash Fury is not amazing. But, hey, I'm not gonna... Like I said, I don't know much about the Inquisitor.
Yeah, I like the Faith Hunter, because it's kind of like you get... I think it's the one where you kind of get smite, right?
Yeah. You sworn enemy someone or something. Yeah, you get smite as a 6th level ability.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's neat. I think that kind of like starts to bridge the gap between, the paladins. And it's like a halfway point in there, which I think is neat.
Mm-hmm.
I have one of my players in Wrath is playing an Inquisitor. He's playing the Inquisitor of Caden Kaladin, and I always love that because I always think it's kind of like a very silly, maybe not silly, but kind of like weirdly at odds with itself type of character, right? Because Caden Kaladin, like, Inquisitors are kind of like these gruff, like, you will obey the church, and Caden Kaladin is kind of this like, oh, let's get drunk type of god. And I think that this kind of this Faith Hunter is also like good for kind of like, would be good for something like Wrath of the Righteous, where like, your enemy is kind of very set and distinct. With demons. Secret Seeker. Like, I guess if you wanted to play kind of like the interrogator type, it's good for that. Not much else to say about it.
Yeah, not really. The tactical leader, you get tactician, so that's basically the whole archetype as far as I see it.
Traceless operative. It's like rogue features.
I actually like this one a
Okay.
little bit more, and I like it in the context of I actually think that there was room for. I tried to do it a little bit in Hell's Rebels, but it didn't quite work out the way I wanted to, and I think that's, at the end of the day, it's okay. But I actually think that there's room for like hardcore stealth play almost in Pathfinder. So like I could see a group be all be very stealth focused, right? And and like this is one way to make your Inquisitor like ridiculously stealth focused, and you're playing the game a little bit more like it's like you're playing Deus Ex stealth only kind of thing, right? Compared to playing it like, I don't know, Dragon Age Inquisition kind of thing.
Yeah, I feel like this is one. There's a handful of archetypes that kind of fit around certain themes that if you got the whole party to agree to do it, it'd be neat. Like there's a cleaner archetype for what is it? Stalker? Not Stalker. Why can't I remember the name of it? The
Slayer.
Slayer. Yes. And I think like if you built a party around those kinds of characters, it's like infiltrate, fuck shit up, and get out. Like that could be a cool thing. You need a campaign set up for it. Essentially, you wouldn't want to try and like run Rise of the Rune Lords with that. It's like we infiltrate the ogre house type of like.
yeah. I feel that.
But yeah, I agree with you. It's got some neat features. Yeah. I like Umbral Stalker and kind of like it's like it kind of reminds me of like Batman in a way, like comes out of the dark, fucks your shit up, and that's like their deal.
Okay, I see it in that sense. That's fair.
And I think that it gets that it does it well, it does it solidly with some solid mechanics. And I don't think there's much else to say about it.
No, yeah, I mean this one didn't wow me. It didn't grab my attention. Honestly, same thing with Vigilant Defender.
Yeah, it's just like a tanky.
Yeah, I almost like the idea of Vigilant Defender in combination with a more spellcasting focused. There's just this line that kind of made Vigilant Defender from kind of like to like interesting to a certain extent, where it says these Vigilant Defenders often work alongside traveling clerics and paladins. Like I almost like a Vigilant Defender who's traveling with a very like a frailly kind of cleric who needs that protection. I can get behind that. That's cool. It doesn't necessarily have to be divine, obviously, but the RP is what I don't know. The RP is what I'm looking for.
Yep.
Don't tell me you're going to take any of these new investigator archetypes.
Oh no! Like I looked at them because I was like, "Oh boy, this is an intrigue book. Maybe these investigator archetypes are great." But like the cipher is like you hide from things real good. The conspirator is kind of neat. Like it's kind of like this kind of like bluff, paranoid kind of dude, but like it's like a couple of features that you could swap out easily if you had them to swap out, but I don't think it's anything special.
I could definitely see conspirator like work out in like a different Hell's Rebels game, like a more criminally focused one, or like Council of Thieves or whatever that one is. Like, I think those are definitely games built for it, but it doesn't have a place kind of anywhere else to kind of whatever extent.
Forensic Physician is like it is exactly what it sounds like. It's like, I guess if you wanted to play CSI, you could play a Forensic Physician. It seems weird. It seems like kind of weirdly out of place for the setting. But if that's the kind of character you want to play, go for it, I guess.
Yeah, I kind of like it in the context of someone who wants to almost be like House, but like I get it, but I can't see where it would ever be like useful.
Yeah.
Like at what point is disease lore really gonna like make or break your game? Well, it's kind of not.
Yeah, it'd have to be like it'd have to be a campaign kind of built around it, which is I find that that's true for a lot of these things in this book in particular. That if you had a campaign that was tailored to this kind of action, it would make a good like. If you ran like a one-off or like a short campaign where the characters were all pre-gened and you handed this character to someone, it would work.
That would be interesting. Yeah, I feel that.
I don't know if this would work at like guys, we're gonna solve the crime of the century. It's like, I built a barbarian and we can hit it all. Instead, like doing it like this, like you get to play the forensic investigator. Ooh, I think that could make for a cool and different Pathfinder experience. But I think it has to be really kind of tailored to that experience.
Yeah, definitely. In a similar sense, I also kind of feel that way about the hallucinist, where I kind of think that, you know,
Want
you
some
really,
drugs,
you really
kid?
have to, you really have to want to play this. Like,
Yeah.
you really have to want to play this class, and it's one of those, or this archetype, and even on top of that, I feel like you can't play it in a lot of games just because of how weird it is.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys just heard my cat meowing, but she's very noisy in the background. um, it honestly kind of sucks because I think the hallucinist has some interesting, like, I like, for instance, in whatever the psychic book was,
Cult Adventures.
Occult Adventures, there's a hallucinist kind of version of maybe the psychic, who takes drugs to induce stuff, and I think that's a neat idea. It seems, I don't know. This is just really not a class for me. I shouldn't be judging it one way or the other because it's so clearly not built for the buddies of the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even like for it's just a very weird, like, if you wanted to play a druggy character, you could do worse in this class. But I don't know if I'd want to make. I don't know if I'd want to make a character that's so much about the drugs that I'd want it to be their entire class identity.
Yeah, me neither. The Major Domo is a class I actually like a lot. I think the class has a lot going for it. I kind of like it more than it is good, and I could see myself never play it, but it really fills that fantasy for me, and I think that it is just super cool.
Yeah, I felt like it was kind of like an NPC class again. Like,
yeah,
it's just like I can't imagine being in a campaign where like your character's job is to like be a major domo for either an NPC or I guess you could run it as like, or this would also be a good cohort archetype.
Oh, definitely. Like you are the noble and they're your major domo. That's cool. That's neat.
Yeah, so I'm going to take leadership at level 7 and take one of these. No, but I think you're right. It fulfills the idea pretty perfectly. But I just don't think it's like, this might also be good for like if you have a player that shows up every once in a while, it'll maybe slot into that kind of. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean they also get tactician. The delegate feature is basically tactician.
I did not realize that.
I don't know if it's better or worse because, I mean, they get it at level 1 and it scales up pretty well.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't know. It looks like it's honestly pretty down the line, but like Inspired Manager at 3rd level, a major dono knows how to make just about any work task more efficient, from cleaning a great hall after a big party to crafting a magic item. And it's like, I get that. I really get that. And I see how somebody could break that, like, hardcore. Crafting a bunch of magic items and making tons of gold off of it and all that kind of, like, with the right downtime rules and the wrong GM, you could really break a game with that.
This is how we broke Nick's Kingmaker campaign a couple years ago. Was we all took leadership and we all had our cohorts take like the item creation feats, and we just had access to everything.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, because that game, like Kingmaker, is about having all of the downtime. So, I think that's something that the systems don't handle well, is like campaigns with like built-in large amounts of downtime. It's like, well, I'm gonna cheese the fuck out of this because why wouldn't I? Type of. It's like one of those things where it's like, well, even if I'm a well-intentioned player, am I supposed to get myself and like take non-optimal things because I don't know, type of deal.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely feel that. And then there are all these mesmerist archetypes that are instantly terrible because the mesmerist is terrible.
I'm not as down on the mesmerist as you are. I don't even know what to say about the Enigma. Like, it gets sneak attack. You've got your rogue mesmerist. Like, I feel like there's a lot of classes like this. Like, get sneak attack on, or a lot of archetypes are like, get sneak attack on this not rogue class. Like, it's like the vivisectionist for alchemists.
Fair enough.
Yeah, it's a stealthy mesmerist. I think the eye biter is just like bears mentioning because it's so so fucking weird. He literally plucks the eyeball out of his head and it flies around. Like, what the actual fuck?
You know, there's actually more than one of these, these kinds of really weird archetypes floating around Pathfinder. I would like to, like, kind of collect them all, just to kind of have, like, a Pathfinder, just, like, what the fuck edition of the weird, just, like, of the weird stuff that exists out there.
You think of anything in particular?
Now I'm thinking of the Serpent Archer, but that's also a third party.
Yeah.
The Serpent Archer is just so weird. And the Eye Biter is also very weird. It has a strength score of 1, a dexterity score of 12, and a constitution of 10.
And it flies around, and you can destroy your... If it gets destroyed, you have to get regeneration. Yeah, you have to regenerate your eyeball.
Which is, that's cool, I guess.
Yeah, it's like someone was like, it's like someone went to like head of design at Paizo and was like, yo, I've got the dankest idea for a Mesmer's archetype. And he's like, okay, let's hear it. It's like eyeballs. It's like, what? You poke your eyeballs out and they fly around and you can like make people not see well. Like, eyeball really speaks to my like core Mesmer's fantasy. It's like, what the what the hell is this shit?
See,
like,
actually, I feel like it's the opposite way. I feel like whoever, like James Jacobs or whoever was sitting down for this book, and he was like, "Guys, I have a great idea." The eye biter that he explains, and everyone's like, okay, boss. Yeah, I guess that works." And nobody thought to actually bring it up to James. James would be like, this is dumb. This is retarded.
And he gets a Ghost Dragon, ridiculous. And his third hit does triple damage.
And then there's the Fey Trickster, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's fine for what it is, which is kind of like Fey based.
He definitely feels pretty tricky.
Yeah.
I think Fey Veil is a neat ability. I guess. It's a shit class. Terrible.
It's kind of like a weird kind of like ramp up to it. It's like you got a feature for like levels like you can replace you get Druid and Ranger spells instead of like your Mesmerist stuff. You get some Fey stuff at level 2 and level 3. And then at level 20 you get a new capstone.
Yeah, and at level 20 you just become a Fey.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Yeah.
I guess I don't know. I've actually this is a little bit of a tangent, but I'm not a big fan of Fey stuff or outsider stuff in general. It's never really appealed to me in like I don't know, in game terms. I just feel like I like dealing with the real world of Galarian and kind of that the planes shifting, the planes hopping that happens isn't something I get very intrigued by, to make a pun out of it.
I think the Thought Eater's neat. Like, if you wanted to, like, I like the idea of being able to kind of like assume the identity of somebody else, but it also kind of requires having that person. Like, I get the fantasy, right? Like, you kidnap somebody and you like look into my eyes and you become that person and go fuck with someone. And it kind of flavors that class a little bit more evil than I would like. Um, I think it's neat, but I think that like say like the infiltrator investigator does kind of like that job a little bit better. Other than the specific kind of like, stare at a dude and become that dude like before his eyes type of specific fantasy. I guess I'm glad that the mechanic exists, but I don't think it's a particularly.
I actually think it's a really neat idea with pretty terrible execution.
Yeah.
I think that, if they did go a little bit harder for it, in that like infiltrator sense, in that kind of disguise focused sense, I would be more down with this class archetype. But as it is, it's just kind of uninteresting, and it doesn't really provide. It doesn't really do what I think it doesn't do what it says on the tin. It doesn't really get there.
Yeah.
I think that disguise bonus on assume identity is really weak. So it's just not a very good disguise bonus. I don't know. I guess if you you really
is
just
equal
have
to the
to
fucking Mesmer's level? That's fucking terrible.
Yeah.
Like what the
yeah. I mean, it's good if you cheat it out, and as we have learned recently, the disguise check is kind of nuts. In that, if you pump it, you can just be anyone at all time. You can just literally be anybody else because it's really not built for someone to cheese it through the roof. But if you wanted to cheese even harder, here we got the Thought Eater and assume identity, I guess, or whatever. And then the Vizier is actually kind of neat. I think it has a core fantasy and it executes pretty well on it.
It reminds me of the Major Domo in that way.
Yeah. It's definitely. I mean, Vizier will never not be tied to Jafar from Aladdin for me. That's what a Vizier is. That's who a Vizier is. Yeah. And so the fact that this so perfectly fits with who Jafar is as a character makes me down for this class.
I'd like it'd be neat to these kind of legendary green tech stories you read on Reddit. It'd be neat to start a game at 7th or 8th level and be playing a creature with leadership that has a Vizier as what you assume is the or what is portrayed as the follower but is actually the main character. And they've kind of got this who knows, some do-gooder in front of them, and then the big reveal at the end is that it's the he's just kind of this corrupting influence.
Yeah.
But it's also, I think, kind of more suited to an NPC. Just because there's so few, this definitely has an evil vibe to it, and there are so few evil games out there. You have to run an evil game to kind of effectively run this character.
Man, I really do want to. I really want to run an evil game someday. I also just think that the one ability is neat, where you can cast from someone else.
Yeah.
To look unassuming. That's so cool. That's so awesome. It doesn't work in dungeon delvey situations, but it works, I think, in a lot of others, which is cool.
Yeah.
I think that's
so
neat.
I think this would even be great to play as without the insidious influence kind of flavors it bad, but I could see a game where two friends and one of them is just kind of the face, the other one's kind of in the shadows and doesn't want to be seen. It's but he acts through his friend. I think that could be cool, but the insidious influence kind of, I guess you don't have to use it, but it kind of flavors it in that kind of manipulative way.
Yeah, I definitely think it does. There's this Vox.
I actually like the Vox archetype. I like the idea of one. I just like the name, and I like the idea of it's through his voice instead of through his stares. I think it kind of gives him a fairly generic set of abilities to go with that, but
yeah, I basically agree. It's one of those things. It's not built for me, but I can see it's not built for me, but I can see who it is built for, and I can see somebody else make this class really shine.
Yeah, I could see myself playing this archetype,
but
the kind of honeyed words, type of hypnotism, and it's got a bunch of cool. So from like a very Captain Crunchy type of perspective, it gets a lot of Sonic spells, and Sonic is like the second best energy type in the game generally.
Yeah, because there aren't resists for it.
Yeah.
But I guess we've come to, I guess, the halfway point of these archetypes, because we actually went through each one, and we spent a lot of time talking about it in the beginning. But I guess we should come back to this.
Yeah.
All of this stuff. I don't mind mining Ultimate Intrigue. It's probably one of my favorite of these Pathfinder books that have come out in recent memory. To be honest, like the book is as a whole.
Yeah.
Though I haven't read all of it yet. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, I haven't finished the back half of it. I read the items because the items are cool, but yeah.
The Mastering Intrigue chapter is actually really neat. It's really awesome. I don't know that I would actually. It's one of those things where I have to think about pretty hard about whether or not, like, how I would incorporate this stuff. But I think that they've really hit the nail on the head when it comes. I don't know.
Yeah. All right. Well, this week we've got when this episode goes up, the Hell's Rebels will be tomorrow, and then it will be. What is it? The next week will be it'll be Rune Lords, and then that'll be the kind of schedule set out, and then anything else? I might be streaming Dark Souls 3, so keep your eyes out for that on the channel, boys and girls. If I can get the frame rate to cooperate, if I can't, I might not. Who knows? We'll see. Anything you wanted to plug, buddy?
Not off the top of my head, I guess. I probably should stream to the channel. I should stream some of these League games with the Korea friends to the channel. We had a whole bunch of really good games today where I made some really awesome plays, including Alistar headbutting an Ashe out of a Bard's Magical Journey to her death. And, last minute, I was playing supports today, because that's what I play in my main account a lot of the time, but that would probably be a good idea to a certain extent. But yeah,
if you want to tell us what you think of these archetypes, or how Alistar's bullshit, or anything really, you can email us at some derpsplaygames@gmail.com. You can comment on the SoundCloud track. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Twitch and YouTube. Links will all be in the description. And that's pretty much it. Anything else, buddy?
No, I think we're solid. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, until next time, dear
friends.
listeners.
Yeah, until next time, definitely.